Welcome you again with us this afternoon, John, and a special welcome to Joanne as well, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm just, can people hear me? I think you can do a thumbs up there. You can maybe guide them, Josephine.
It seems most can hear so far. Some are raising their hands to indicate that the sound is okay. That's good to hear. I know Bob and Myrna are having a little bit of trouble getting connected. If you want to raise your hand, if you look at the top of your screen, there is a figure with a raised hand, a little icon. Click on the arrow to the right, and there will be an option to raise your hand. Seems like most can hear. And once you've finished raising your hand, you can click that same arrow and scroll down to the bottom of the menu to clear your status. Thanks very much.
Okay. Shall I just roll on? Okay. Okay. How this is going to work is Joanne and I really are responsible, in quotation marks, for the shift in this congregation that was quite dramatic. A group of about 38 that called me, and probably 38 to 50 odd folks in worship to just started our second service, and somewhere between 250 and 3 a week, the two services. Made lots of changes. Was called to lead and connect to the community, and that call, which I spoke about last week, is really important to consider what you're called to by your congregation. So we sort of looked the first week at worship and what is unique about our worship. What we tried to do is we listened to culture, and the second was on leadership and talked a bit about how to get the right people in the right spot. I just want to comment on that. That isn't done in arrogance. It is done in humility. It is done with a professional will. So the book talks about, Good to Great talks about professional will, personal humility. So a real attempt to get the right people in the right spot to do the right things. So today I want to talk a bit about culture, because I came out of United Rural Church, large suburban, then I went to United Way, which was very helpful in recognizing that lots of the world functions quite well without us. There's lots of different churches, in quotation marks. That is, places that are doing church-like things, connecting to community, social justice work. You might even sharing their time, talent, and treasure. So what could we learn from those communities like the United Way that tend to do good work? So I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes straight, and then I can take a bit of questions. And Joanne's going to help in some of the very practical things. But I wanted to give you a sense of the foundation, what I would call sort of my foundational thinking, theology from various sources that have helped me, as I read their stuff, go, oh yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, or yes, that's helpful. So, sorry if I'm going to talk a little bit, but we'll engage a bit more in a few minutes. So the emerging church gurus that are out there, as I would call them, Phyllis Tickle and Brian McLaren and Doug Padgett and others, Diana Butler-Bass and Harvey Cox, are all kind of saying, I would say, the same thing in their own language to their own audience. And that's okay, that's the way it should be. But one that really stuck with me is Harvey Cox's book, The Future of Faith. Harvey Cox is a retired divinity professor at Harvard Divinity School, wrote a book called The Future of Faith. When I was a kid in the 60s, he wrote a book called The Secular City. I haven't read that book. I was reading Dr. Seuss at that time, but his book, Future of Faith, really speaks to me about what's going on. So let me just say something about it. He begins if you don't read the whole book, read the first chapter. He talks about the difference between belief and faith. He said belief is more about opinion. That is, that people say, I believe this or that about a particular situation, but it doesn't perhaps affect their life. He says what we really should be about is faith, which is what he says is a deep-seated confidence or trust. And people use these words interchangeably, but that's not quite accurate. We should be more about faithfulness than we should perhaps be about belief. He says the prayer should be this: give us this day our daily faith and deliver us from our beliefs. That sense that belief is not quite enough in this day and age. What he says is this, and he breaks it down into three areas. He says the early church from 0 to say 400 was the age of faith. And that is, it was about a pathway pointing to God. It was centered on a way of life. So people followed the ways of Jesus. They ate, they drank, they shared the stories, parable songs about being about the way. And you all know that, you all get that. The early followers of Jesus were called the way. It was about a way of life. So that sort of existed for the first 400 years, the age of faith. Then we moved to what he called the age of belief. From around 400 and 1900, obviously these dates are just specified chunk of time. Moved to what he calls the age of belief. And in that particular time was when the creeds and statements of faith became what people did. What do we believe? What's the difference between us and them? What's the role of women and priests and organizational structure? It was a time when people looked at dogma and doctrine, and they started to write down what they thought about God and tried to explain God. And that age of belief was a part of our life history where the God that was spoken of was a God of control. So the shift there is really interesting, from the age of faith to an age of belief. The present age, he says, we're in is the final phase, calls the age of the Spirit. The age of the Spirit is sort of 1900 to present. And it's in this phase that he talks about it being a God of promise. Where people in their culture, and you think about this, you'll know this, people are anxious and eager to be part of communities that are doing something, going somewhere where they connect to the Spirit. People don't particularly care about the doctrine or dogma. In fact, they don't want that at all. They're about places where the Spirit's at work, where the kingdom of God is happening. They look for an experience of God, not necessarily explain God like you might in the age of belief, but experience God. How do we experience the sacred? So how do we do that in our culture, in our community, in our worship? He says this final phase is really amazing because people will cross denominations. A Catholic will move over to a Pentecostal will move over to an Anglican. In our particular context, what I would say is we have what our congregations are is essentially a third United Church. That is, they grew up in the United Church. A third come from other denominations. So the Catholic, Evangelical, Pentecostal, Presbyterian. And the other third is no church. So they have no Christian memory, no experience of church. That's an age of the Spirit Church. That people are from a variety of backgrounds. We're all not trying to be United Church. We honor and accept the variety of gifts that people come to that. So Harvey Cox says that it's about sort of what you're doing. I want to see what you're doing. I want to experience the sacred. I want to be involved in changing the world. I want to see that what I'm doing is making a difference. And it's through those practices that people get and experience what I would call connectedness. So I'd say, as a book, if a resource you want to look to, is The Future of Faith by Harvey Cox. Really names the shift that I've experienced, this shift in this church. And I've experienced this book making sense of my experience in the church right now. So Diana Butler Bass in this work says it this way: vital churches have these three things happening. One of them is theological reflection. If you think back to the leadership piece I talked about, the importance of meaning and reflection is key. The second is hospitality, and the third is diversity. The churches that are doing, though, have a sense of what's our theology and where we're at, what are we identifying, what's our hospitality, are we really friendly, are we really open, are we really inclusive, and are we diverse? So a similar theologian that I could point you to is Doug Paget, Church in the Inventive Age. He's a person who has written a small, simple book. I don't mean that negatively, but a simple book. And I think I'll come to your comment in a second, Greta. He says this: the shifting role of the leader, okay, is from one that's preaching and teaching and leading, is taking a back seat to pastors' capacity to create and facilitate open faith experience for people in the church. So our role is shifting a bit. I'll tell you that I think preaching is one of the most important things we do. Teaching is very important, but that ability and capability to facilitate what's going on in the world and how it fits with the church is really an important skill. So this is sort of typified when you think about the spiritual and religious conversation. You know, people say, I'm spiritual, I'm not a religious person. I say that's fine, I'm both. The word spiritual, you can define it how you want. For me, is the ability to see the connections, the sacred connections in all of life. So a spiritual person is someone who's looking for connections and trying to connect the dots and make the spirit come alive. That is, not we make it come alive, see the connections come alive. Also the word religion, interesting definition, comes from ligure, which is ligament, which binds muscles together, right? To bind. In a religion, we're bound to the stories, songs, and symbols of our faith. And so I think religious and spiritual go together, and they're not separate. And it's really important that we see that we're about spirituality, and that's not against the church. It's actually, the spirit is pretty active in our faith tradition. And also not to diss the church or the religious role, that there is a role we play in connecting the dots and having people experience why some symbols are important to us, why some sacraments are important to us, what those things mean. When I sort of conclude this piece, there's a story that sort of typifies this. I was asked to speak at an event, a convocation of our former moderator Bill Phipps. I was wanting to write about spiritual hunger. I was sitting at my computer. I was typing and writing about spiritual hunger. Nothing was coming. I was typing and deleting. All I got was hungry physically. So I went to my secretary, said, I'm going next door. I went next door to the Tim Hortons that was there. Always time for Tim Hortons. Came in, sat down, put my books down, and for whatever reason I went to the counter. And I looked at the person behind the counter who was pouring coffee and serving donuts. I just said to her, what do you think people are hungry for? And she kind of looked at me and said, who the hell are you? I said, I'm sorry, I'm the minister next door. And she said, oh, church. I said, yeah. She goes, I used to go to church. When I was a teenager, I became pregnant, and I was shunned by my church. I got tired of the thou shalt nots and the hypocritical thinking, and I was forced out of my church as a pregnant person. I said I was really sorry that had happened. That's not my experience of the church. I was about to leave, and she said, hold on, you asked me a question. I said, yeah, I did. What do you think, from your perspective, what are we hungry for in our culture? Tim Hortons person. She says we are hungry for tolerance, for acceptance, and for unconditional love. And I swear to God, I put my hand into my pocket to pay for the coffee. She put up her hand and she said, it's unconditional. So here's a person in a coffee shop who really clearly gets that tolerance and acceptance and unconditional love is a parable, if you will, for what the church can and could be about. And I continually think about her. I continually speak to strangers about the issues that I'm going to speak about or we're considering in the church. Tolerance, acceptance, and unconditional love is a very interesting approach to how we do what we do. And we have to be really open and humble and listen to the culture, because the culture is not crazy. I'm going to move over for a second here and allow Joanne, but one of the things we say is that our church is not at war with the culture. We don't say we're the faithful remnant, as you hear some churches say, we're doing it right and the culture's all wrong. We really try to listen to what's the culture doing? What are they saying? What's important? So a simple example is, I just finished reading The Hunger Games this weekend. In the very near future, I've got to do a sermon topic on this, because that is a very contextual conversation that people are having about it. So that's sort of groundwork. The Future of Faith is a significant book. All of the people are saying the same thing in their own way. I just want to go to Greta and hang up here. She goes, I agree, but there are folk who say that means that the time the church
will die. Because if you're a vibrant, older, retired congregation.
Okay, here's two things I'd say. One is, I say some churches commit suicide or complete suicide. That is, they make choices that mean their death. And I mean that coming off a week of 3 people killing themselves and the darkness of that. But truly, churches make choices. And think about your own church. What choices are you making? Are they life or are they death? What will they lead to? The second is, it's not about making churches young or trendy or funky. Mm-hmm. You can be an older church, and that's your identity. That's who we are. That's what we do. We serve our seniors really well. Fantastic. Great. You're doing your thing. But if you have other possibilities, those are the ones we try to tap into. This church was a pile of seniors sitting here. It's not in a seniors neighborhood. It's got bars around it. It's coffee shops. Young people are here. How do you pay attention to that market? So I want to now, you can pose a question right now, and then I want Joanne to, so she's just noting, one of the things I would say on that statistically, most United churches, the average age was 65. Ours was 50 in that survey. We didn't really push it. That's the number of people, that's the age that filled in. But the biggest difference between us and other United churches is most people in this church have been here, the statistics survey said 4 years. Most United churches, 25 years. Okay? So in our particular community, when we did a membership a couple of years, 2 years ago, because we were doing some work on our building, we had to do membership. We had 76 people join our church one Sunday morning. 76 people joined our church on a particular Sunday. So that's another whole topic is membership. But I'm going to invite Joanne to make this a bit more concrete. I'm just sort of giving you the thinking, if you will, about the shift from of the age of faith to the age of belief to the age of the Spirit, and think about the importance of letting go of some things so that the Spirit can get at work.
I just wanted to add something to what John was saying, and that is that we start from the position in everything that we do that it's not about us sitting in the pews. It's not about our church per se. It's about our community. And that community encompasses our church. So it's really important to think about the people who are on site or outside the doors. And I just want to give you 2 examples of people that have been touched by our community. One of them, well, they both have come in through, we do musicals every year. And I'll get to that later. But they're large musical theater type things, and they draw kids and adults. They're multi-generational, so that it's one of those, it's a microcosm of what the church should be. So there's the youngest this year actually was 2 years old. She was with her mother the whole time, dressed in a costume, and the oldest was probably close to 60, and we had an age range, multi-age range in there. But anyway, so it's a microcosm of a church to me. You have to pull together, you have to rely on each other, you have to do your work and have your responsibility. But anyway, one of the guys has been in our show 2 or 3 times, and he came out to help at another event, and he and talked to other people who were there. And he told me later about the long conversation he'd had about our church that he doesn't attend really. And then he said to me, I don't really think of myself as part of your church, but I do think of myself as part of your community. And so I want to challenge you all to think about not the people who are sitting in the pews on Sunday morning, but the people who might come through your building or come to some of your programs, and think of them as your community. So when we put the bulletin together all the time, if I have to say something about church, I always say community. I don't say church, because there's that sense of being broader than just the church. And the other one is actually the guy, we hire a guy every year to play for our musicals, and he's brilliant. He just won a competition in Winnipeg for the Winnipeg Symphony to play as an emerging artist. He's just brilliant. And why he comes to play, really honestly, I couldn't figure out why he said yes again this year to come play for our show for next to no money. He has a friend who participates. But I had the opportunity to have a conversation with him, and he said to me, I come back, for me as the director and for the woman that he stays with every year. He said, because with all brilliance basically that he has, he said, I never really had parents, and you are like parents to me. And that just really struck me in terms of what our community is really about. It's about being home for people, regardless of whether they sit in the pews or not. That when they experience our building, our walls, whatever they're in our building that we're connected to, that they feel at home. And I really sense in our culture that there is that sense that there's no rest. Okay, so I have been in United Church seminars where they talk about, oh no, our church should be a place away from culture because we're bombarded by images and we're constantly, in a rush. And so we need to have a church where people can just sit and meditate and feel like they've got an oasis. I don't disagree with that in some contexts, but I think what John and I have tried to do is say, okay, people are bombarded by images all the time. They're always in a rush. They get so much information. So let this be the place that can figure out what that means for our spiritual lives. So don't shy away from all the images, the movies, everything that people are seeing. Find a way to integrate them and explain them and touch someone's spirit in a way that brings them home. I think that's sort of the goal. So starting with our first slide here, this is the banner that hangs outside of our church. Whoever you are, wherever you're at, join us on the journey. I think we spoke in worship how we arrived at that. That was our statement that we came up with in our 100th year, because we wanted people to know this is not your grandma's church. It looks like your grandma's church. The stained glass is beautiful. The organ's nice, but it's not your grandma's church. Whoever you are, join us on the journey. And we wanted to make sure that we were affirming of all people. And so we did become an affirming congregation. We went through the process. I would say that our affirming ministry is a really important part of the congregation now. When we became an affirming congregation, we had a few gay and lesbian people in our congregation. That segment has grown a lot because people feel safe. So recognize we're in an urban center and in sort of the funky part of town, and that demographic is a huge part of this community. So we recognize that and we celebrate that, and that has been a growing edge for sure in our community. So that's the banner. It's outside. We try to live by it always. The other thing that we do, and John is really particularly good at this, is we try and get our message out to the broader community in a way, unconventional ways. So you can advertise in the Calgary Herald, but it's enormously expensive to put your little ad saying this is our sermon on Sunday morning and who's preaching. And we did that for a long time, and then we found the people who actually read that ad were members of our congregation who wanted to see who was preaching on that Sunday. So we did not think it was a good use of our money, and we don't advertise in the Herald anymore. What we do is, if there is something interesting happening in our building or in our place, we contact the religion editor at the Herald and say, hey, we got a story for you. John is on first name basis with the guy in Calgary, and often we'll feed him a story, and he is very interested in the stories that we have. So we've had in the Herald, which is the paper here, on our new building project, we are thinking of expanding or changing, doing some affordable housing on half of our site. That was a story in the paper. We had a Sunday, we were talking about yoga and the Church of the Future. That was a story in the Herald, that this was a yoga church, had a picture of the person in our church who was teaching a yoga class. When we had our affirming celebration, John happened to be on sabbatical, we got the mayor to come and speak. That became a story, not just in the Herald, but it was also on television, 2 television stations in town who wanted to know about churches and the LGBT community. So we had an opportunity to speak that way. And in addition to that, we've had articles. We have a media and communications person who feeds stories to Gay Calgary, for instance. So when we had the course on religious refugees, that was in Gay Calgary magazine, just saying it's a safe place for you if you're from a community that is ostracized you spiritually because you're gay. Here's a course for you and here's a place for you. So all the different articles and things that have appeared are on our website, hillhurstunited.com, and then there's a thing, Hillhurst in the News. So yeah, it's true about the newspaper. We just had this. It's the Gutenberg culture, not the Google culture. Absolutely true. That is true. Although those stories are also always on the internet. So, and that brings me to an interesting.
I just want to pipe in here. So this is one of several you're going to hear about, okay? But I think if we just did Facebook and Twitter, we would be missing a chunk of the general populations. You got to hit them all. So we started first with the traditional Gutenberg one.
Right. Okay. So I took a course in digital culture worship. And they draw the distinction between literate culture, the Gutenberg culture, and digital culture. And the most boomers actually live still in literate culture. So that is still a big segment of our churches, the sort of 50-something. So they still do read the paper. They still do read books. And they still do think in ideas. Digital culture has moved away from literary things. They watch movies. They go on the internet. They're interested in story. They're not interested in ideas as much as they are in being transformed of feelings. But our churches, if you can just get the 50-year-old demographic, you're still doing well in a lot of churches. So we have moved our worship and our thinking not completely, but to the digital culture. So we like story and such like that, which was in our worship segment, about the idea that the grounding in worship is story, not theology. So anyway, if you want to check out our website, just a note on the marketing on the website. Our media and communications person redid our website completely. And honestly, as an almost 50-year-old person, I look at it and I go, wow, there's a lot of white space on that. I'm not sure about that website. Then she pointed me to the Apple website, and she said, see, this is how websites go. Not a whole bunch of information, but a lot of white space so people can breathe and see. So I've been to lots of church websites that want to get everything on the front page. And it's actually counterproductive to do that, because people are just like, whoa, white space. So if you'd like to take a look at our website sometime, feel free. So we did speak.
Sorry, that sort of is the media sluts piece. That I was at an event on the advertisements. This event in Toronto where a woman, I can't remember her name, talked about how the church has to be a media slut. That is, try to find every opportunity to be effective in the news. And so that's so that people know you're alive and you're doing interesting things. I was driving down the road one day with my daughter, and then went by a church sign. It said, tea and dainties, 2:00 Saturday. So you got 20,000 people driving by, and the sign is tea and dainties. You're really just sort of saying, well, we're still stuck in the 50s. My daughter said, what's a dainty, right? So when you think about communicating, whether it's in the newspaper or your church sign or whatever, what do you really want to say? And is it stupid? Is it churchy? Is it archaic? Is it Gutenberg? Whatever you want to call it. It's really, really important to have an observer look at you and what you're about.
I noticed one of the comments was that lots of rural churches have Facebook pages, and I'd say that's great as long as you have somebody who's on the Facebook page. Okay, so just setting up a Facebook page and thinking, oh, now I can put this on once a month, great. But if you don't have something new all the time on your Facebook page, if you're not tweeting something every day, if you're not in the community, then you've just set up the infrastructure without any content, and it's not going to be helpful for you. So our media and communications person tweets every day something, puts something, hey, why don't you check this out? This is just puts statements, that are aligned with our ministry on the page, or tweets it, so that there's this constant reminder of who we're about. We had a woman not long ago who is not a part of our congregation who said on the Facebook page, wow, a church that's truly inclusive, that sounds different. So it's not just setting up the structure, it's making sure it's maintained. And that's actually a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do that. That's why we have dedicated media and communications person. Just going a little bit more to culture. So we have this Real Theology series every year we do in Lent. Used to be easier when there were only 5 films, because then we just took one per Sunday, but now there's 10, so we have to be a little bit more selective. But we use the film as text for the day. A lot of people have seen the films, or what they will do is go out and see the films before we speak about them. And then John he's usually preaching during that time. He will develop his sermon with a biblical text and with the movie, drawing from the characters, from the redemptive features of the film. And it becomes a way of a conduit, a bridge between what people have seen and what they hear in church. And those bridges are really important everywhere. Songs, for instance, can do the same thing. During Epiphany, the song that we used as sort of an introduction was Firework by Katy Perry. About you're a light and you're a firework, let your color show. And a great song, and we played that, and the energy got people moving too. They liked it, even though a lot of them listened to CBC, so they'd never heard the song. But still, that was a point in culture where, like, my daughter, who's 13, hears that song, and automatically, church isn't my church, it's her church, because there's something in it that she recognizes from school or from what she listens to on the radio. So those bridge points we look for in lots of places, not just films during Real Theology. Songs, this week we're actually dealing with mental health, and there's 2 songs that we're going to sing. One of them, old song, you all know them, but still the kids like it too, is Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler. And we're going to use that song this week because it fits the whole idea of mental health. And there's another song called Pills. I can't remember what the group is because our media and communications person is 30. She chose that song. Never heard of the group. But you got to be open to the ideas of young people and their culture and bring that in. And that's what we try to do. So the whole Real Theology thing is really important because people then go email their friend, hey, my minister spoke about this movie on Sunday, why don't you check it out on the website, or this is a thought about that movie, because you go to a party, and I'm sure it's the same in rural areas as it is in urban areas. When you're at one of those chatty things, it's like, oh, did you see this movie, or did you hear that piece of news, or have you seen that website, that new YouTube clip's gone viral? I mean, the internet is rural as well as urban, and those things, so we'll show clips on YouTube as well. For instance, I don't know if you remember when the gay American soldier came out to his father on YouTube after Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. Well, that happened to fit our message that Sunday, so we showed that clip that had gone viral in the church because it fit. So I just can't tell you enough. Yes, you're an oasis away from culture, your place where people can fill up and where they can drink and where they can feel at home, but they still need to navigate the waters of life. And you as a church and as a place of spiritual well-being can help people to live in their culture in a restful, peaceful way if you can help integrate that into their lives. So that's what we do.
That's a bulletin cover, by the way, and
right.
There's a question here about copyright using pop.
Okay, so a lot of we get most of our images off a site called ThinkStock, and that's so we pay for our images mostly on our bulletin. If there's a movie or something, they've released a lot of gallery shots and such, which is really marketing for them. So those kinds of things you can use. If it's a YouTube video also, these are things that people have put up on the internet. It is a fine line, personal use kind of stuff, and we are doing it in church. But the licensing, most of the time, our images are off a site where we've paid, ThinkStock, and most of the time we have the movie licenses for any clips that we show that are studio clips. When we do the Real Theology, it's usually the trailer that we show. Sometimes it's a clip from the movie, but like I said, we have our Alberta conference has an agreement licensing so we can use clips. Don't show movies in your church without a license. I feel strongly about that, but we have that covered off, so most of our images are that way. But like I said, a movie, a news story, something like that is not as much subject to copyright as if someone takes an image, for instance, and it's their work of art, then I shy away from using those kinds of things. I don't just go on the internet. I don't think you should just go on the internet and steal pictures. Be very ethical in your use of images and such from culture. That's my note on that. So apart from, we talked about the news, getting your stories in, because there are interesting people in your congregation who are doing interesting things, and they have to put that out every week. So they're interested in good stories. And apart from when people come into our building, hearing culture and understanding culture through the lens of our theological framework, we also then try to do events inside the community. So, for instance, this year, we do every year the Salsa Fest. The Kensington, it's called the BRZ, the Business Revitalization Zone. They put on a Salsa Fest every year, and all the businesses make salsa, and people come and taste them, and then they have some other thing. They're selling stuff. It's like a little festival. So the church participates in the Salsa Fest. We have people who make the salsa, and we have a dunk tank. And so the first year we got these T-shirts. John has one on there that has WWJD, and it's not what would Jesus do, but who would Jesus dunk. That's what we decided was sort of the theme of the dunk tank. And you can see John here is all wet because he's been dunked, and he takes his moment at the dunk tank. What that does is that people in our community who come down for the festival then see us participating, not giving out tracts saying of the 4 spiritual laws like a lot of churches would do, or trying to find a way to convert you, but just a way to participate in our community and say, hey, we understand what's going on here and we want to be a part of it. And so that's the Salsa Fest. At Christmas time then, because we'd been in the Salsa Fest, they called us up and they said, we're giving out coupon books for Christmas. Do you want to put your church in the coupon book, the Kensington coupon book? And so we put in a coupon for caroling. We were going to go caroling, we decided, in the community. They asked us if we would do this. Will you come caroling through Kensington? Really trendy part of Calgary. And so we got together a group of people, put the coupon book in, and we had people actually from the community that just wanted to carol, not even part of our church, who came and joined us, and we walked through the Kensington zone and handed out cards for Christmas Eve and for the Christmas musical that we were doing. And it was just a way of advertising, basically. And so that the Kensington BRZ now knows that Hillhurst United Church is interested in being part of their stuff, and they contact us. So that's a great way to say to our community, hey, we get where you're at today, and we want to be a part of that. So that's the Salsa Fest.
We also, when I first got here, about 150 yards down the road is a wine market. So I teamed up with them and did a wine and spirituality evening. And it was, again, publicized in the neighborhood as wine and spirituality. There were people from the church and the neighborhood there. I've done it a few times. They do Old Testament wines and New Testament wines. But it's really a chance to, again, connect with the community, say wine's part of our story too, to have a good evening. Trying to find connection with the businesses or the stores or the services within your community is really important. The coffee shop that is here, at one point we brought in their coffee on Sunday mornings once a month. They gave us free coffee, and I mean good coffee. And we just really try to be a good neighbor. And we did that when we were doing our visioning process. We went and listened to what's going on in the neighborhood. We specifically asked what a church could offer to the neighborhood. We really have to humble ourselves. The image for me used to be the church was on the football field throwing the ball. We were the quarterback. We are now on the sideline. And we're sort of putting up our hands saying, can I play? Can I play? So we have to take that with humility, not with anger. We've screwed up in some ways, or the world has changed in some ways. We still have a huge role to play, but we have to listen to what is our role in the culture.
I noticed a few questions around copyright with music. So we happen to be lucky in Canada because there is what's called a ceremonial exemption for music. And what that means is if you are having a ceremony, so a church service, education exemptions as well, you can play music, and it is not subject to copyright. So that's an important thing to remember. That's how you can play or sing any music that you want in your services, and it's under the ceremonial exemption. There is an issue if you're having a concert, but usually if you buy the music, the performance performance rights are also included with that, so it's not so much of an issue. So that's just a note on that. So I was talking before about the musicals that we do every year. This year we did Honk, and most of you probably haven't heard of it. It's a British musical, but it's about the ugly duckling. So I have been doing musicals in churches for probably 20 years, and there's only 1 or 2 church musicals that I've ever done, and those are for church services. The musicals that we do are so that, first of all, for the community. I find that they are the best way to bring people together. And many of the people who have come to our church sit in the pews, they join the musical, and they end up on the church board. There's probably 3 of them on the board now that really integrated into our church through the church musical. And so it's never religious musical per se. In fact, my daughter had a friend who said something about the church musical, there's something missing. There's no Jesus in your church musical. And it's true. She came from a more conservative church. But there are always redemptive stories, and they include a lot of different people. Those people invite their friends into the church. So most of our audience is not the church members. They do come now too, but it's the friends and family of the people who are in the congregation, and they then have a way of inviting their life into the church in a way that is not threatening, that's not too churchy. So these musicals have become a really important part of our community, and it's always a touchstone to culture. So we've done Seussical the musical, and we've done Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. This one was Honk. We did Narnia last year. But they're usually musicals that people have heard of so that they can sell tickets and bring people into our community. We get to be a community. We get to expand into the community. So it's a great way. And this is just a picture. We just did this show of part of the cast. It's not the fanciest thing in the world, but people have this sense that there's little kids and there's adults. They have a sense of this is a fun place and a place where people really connect with each other. That's why we do it. That's why it's important. That's why we put staff hours into it. And so if you have something in your community, I think the arts are a great way to reach out to people. So whatever the talents are in your community, find a way to move those talents into the broader community and bring more people into your space and into your place by thinking about reaching out with these efforts. So we talked about Hillhurst being an affirming ministry, and this is our affirming statement. It's in our bulletin, and any kind of document that we put out, even if people are just coming in and they're getting some program from us, lots of times we'll have our affirming statement in there so that people know that we are a place that is safe for all people. And I think that's really important that the church speak that way very clearly to marginalized communities, that we're a safe place and you can come in here and we will accept you fully, not just we have a gay group, for instance. You can be part of our congregation. We want you to be part of our congregation. Pretty soon, it doesn't matter anymore whether you're gay or straight. That's the Lady Gaga song, and we've played that one too. Being a part of our community is the most important thing. Do you want to add something to that, John?
I would say, the way in my mind, some of the way the affirming work started, this was early on in my time here. I literally asked a gay guy in the church, said, "Can you get me one of the pride flags?" He got me one. It's about 4 by 5 inches. Just slapped it in the front door without asking anybody or anything. Just did it, right? I expected it to disappear. It didn't at all. So then, sort of a year or so later, when we talked about affirming, I was kind of like, "Oh, we've already done this, haven't we?" And I soon realized I was completely wrong. We needed to have a conversation about what we mean by affirming, and it wasn't just about gay and lesbian, transgender people, but everybody that's in that statement. When we had our first affirming day, we had gone through 6 or 8 months of conversation in the evening, exposure, blah blah blah. I sort of said that first day when we celebrated Affirming that we were just beginning. That is, we're not done. And if you look at this statement here, as an example, this coming week is Mental Health Week. Joanne will be presiding this week. We're going to look at what does that mean to be an affirming church with mental health as a part of our statement. And what does it mean to be a person who's has a disability? Our church is terrible. We have a ramp, but it's next to impossible to get in. And if I was somebody in a wheelchair, I'd probably take a pass. So we got a lot of work to do. It's not like we've arrived at all. But this is sort of the goal of where we want to go and where we want to be. And I guess what I would say is the process of the conversation was really wonderful, to have parents of gay people in community, for people who have had good and bad experiences, for better understanding to come forward. So the whole process wasn't about let's get gay people in here. It was actually a response to what's already here and what does it mean for us. I think the thing I would want to just add is that people will say something like, the church is relevant, like our particular community. I think that's a good thing in that we try to be aware of what's going on during the week in the culture. It's not like we're just the NDP at prayer, or that we are the, we read a newspaper and talk about what it means. But there are certain key issues that we need to address that are part of the culture, that are part of the workplace where people are, and we need to be the ones who, as I said before, sort of take the Bible and newspaper, or Google and newspaper, Google and Bible, and say what's going on that needs to be addressed. It's ongoing, what I would call Christian apologetics. That is, it's ongoing being a welcome mat to new ideas. It's ongoing evangelism. There's a sermon on the website, I can't remember what it's called, but it's on evangelism not long ago, where I sort of talked about what does that mean, marketing our faith, I think the sermon's called. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's what we're doing all the time, forever and a day. And we have to rethink how we do it and what we do. We make mistakes, we miss stuff, but I think that really reconfiguring what's going on and what does it mean to our faith is something we have to do all the time. And it gets tiring and it gets frustrating, and I can understand why some churches say the hell with it, we're not going to bother, we're just going to do our own little thing. I understand that. If you think back to last week when I was talking about committed, comfortable, and curious, this church is for sure about curious. There'll be some people who come here who think it's light and fluffy. There will be others who don't like an aspect of it, but clearly why we're successful right now, I think, is that we are a place that a woman said to me last week, she really liked the sermon. She said, I really understood it, and she didn't feel stupid, and that's really important. It was not a deep theological sermon. It was a reflection on honk and what the ugly duckling, so you can easily shoot arrows at us and knock us out of the sky if you want, but it's meeting our culture where we are. So your culture, whether you're in a rural area or a variety of places I see, they should all be different. Mm-hmm. It's not about copying each other. It's about really listening to what's unique to who we are and what we should be about, and then doing that, because your culture will mesh with the culture of the church.
It was interesting. Last Sunday we had a minister from Vancouver was here. They were visiting their daughter, he and his partner, and they said to me that this church feels like an Alberta evangelical church with a United Church twist. That's what he said. And I was interested to hear that, Alberta evangelical. What it said to me was that probably in Vancouver, our style of worship wouldn't work the same way, because the culture in Vancouver is different than the culture in Calgary. And so when we're saying this, the things that we do here, you have to hear it as this is our culture in Calgary. In our urban, we're sort of in an urban trendy part of Calgary, so we are progressive people. You've noticed from our affirming statement, we're certainly progressive theologically and culturally, socially, the social, cultural things, we're very progressive, but we're still in Alberta. So wherever you are, you need to tap into the vibe of your place. It's really important, and that's what we've sort of tried to do here, marry those two things together.
I'm from Ontario, so when I see the note here about Alberta as a province where conservatives are liberal, that's true, probably. Mm-hmm. But the church is different. I'd say our church in Alberta is far more progressive than it is in Ontario.
Yeah.
Not politically, but that is not like the province politically, but very progressive. Change is good, new ideas, pioneering spirit, all those things. When I go back to Ontario, there's beautiful buildings and they're really taken care of, but nobody there. Here I see really utilitarian buildings and lots of people there. So there's, I've been in Alberta 20 years now, or no, 24 years now. I sense that and see that, and so even when I look at BC, the comment you just heard about, well, those guys, and this may not sound fair, but I don't think they're really as potentially connected to their culture. If that culture is as secular as they say, then the church really needs to shift its gear and connect to that secular culture that's there, because I don't think it's as different as we think. And there's lots of very good things going on in the culture there if we're willing to be spiritual and see the connections.
It's interesting because I come from an evangelical background. So when I was young, that was in the 70s, the people in the church, so they always want to keep young people. The focus was always, how can we keep our young people here? How can we have young people in our church? Which, when that's an emphasis, it becomes the grounding. What are we going to do? So they had like rock bands that would come to church and play for us. We had a movie. I remember my father was prominent in the church. We had a movie on drug use, LSD and stuff like that. That wasn't a Christian movie. It was actually a National Film Board movie. Very interesting things. So I came to the United Church because I was looking for a place that was theologically open, progressive, and aware. I found the theology of the conservative church way too constrictive, and I just didn't think it was real or authentic. So I came to the United Church, and it was like amazing to me that you could have questions and all those, it was open, and God was a woman and a man and a bird, and all these things really made me feel theologically comfortable. But I felt like in a straitjacket in worship, because it was liturgical, we're saying these prayers, and it seemed very dry to me. So my dream, those 25 years ago, was to somehow get the passion that was in the evangelical church that I grew up, the passion and the cultural touchstones, together with this really liberal and progressive theology, and put those things together. In my mind, that would be a dynamic combination. So I've been in 2 or 3 congregations in Alberta where that was starting to happen, and it was good. And then my husband was transferred to Toronto for a couple of years, and we went to a church, great church, beautiful church. Oh my goodness, the building was wonderful. The choir had 8 paid people. The organist was fabulous, and when they walked in with the cross and the choir and the robes and everything, it was a wonderful pageantry, but it didn't really connect to me in my space. And that has been always the curiosity for me about the United Church, is why, when you have the most theologically progressive denomination in the country, does our worship continue to be from the 19th century? I have not understood why that progressive, outward-looking theology has not translated into culturally progressive worship. And that's sort of still a question in my mind, because as much as we try to do that at Hillhurst, it's still a challenge sometimes. So it's just a question for you. How can you take that progressive theological outlook and take that into your worship and into your way of being, and make the church, not from the last century, but moving forward into the next decades?
Well, and how do you have a church that is not just what you do on Sunday morning? That is, that you have music and ideas and website and all those things that are part of the 7-day-a-week kind of thing. If you look at the slide here, Reasons to Love, Mondays. So these are some of the courses, and marketing really matters. What really matters? You could call that Bible 101. Who the heck wants to go to that? What really matters was looking at biblical interpretation of the virgin birth, the crucifixion and resurrection. Okay, understanding substance abuse. There's a person came and talked about this very important issue in our community. Religious refugees was Joanne leading a course for people who were think back to what I said at the very beginning, age of the Spirit people, Catholics, Pentecostals, no church people coming together saying, okay, I'm spiritual and I'm also religious. What does that mean? And how do I hold on to what's important in my faith, and how does that fit in a context of a faith community? Stumbling blocks to faith, similar thing. So my point is, we have to market ourselves in a way that invites people to say it's okay. So I'm amazed when anybody shows up at night. When you think about the billions of things you could do, somebody shows up on an evening to do a course. So all these courses, I would say, had anywhere from 15 to literally a course we did in the fall, 60 people who come to explore. And I think we have to really take seriously. People have great questions. They're not coming to get indoctrinated. They're not coming to just sort of, they're coming to figure out where they're at, what's their faith about, and realize that they're not alone in what they're experiencing. Okay, you guys should ask us some questions. We've talked for a long time. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I guess as I wait for anybody to say something or not, you got to really hear, in all of these three presentations, we're not saying come be like us.
Absolutely.
We are honoring that if you're in a rural community, there are rural aspects of community life that if a church is doing well, taps into and celebrates. And so it's figuring out, how are we relevant to the rural climate we're in? How are we relevant to the culture that we live in? It's not about bringing in a band or slapping up a screen. It's about really saying, this is who we are, and we feel good about it and competent at it, and our numbers are the way we'd like them to be. But this church, when I got here, was none of that. It was not connecting to the community. It was not it was at war with the culture. It was a community of concern church 20 years ago. It was a dark, very dark place, and the opportunity to move 38 people to the abundance we are now is an extreme gift. It takes good leadership. I'm not saying we don't have that. We've got very good leaders and the right people in the right spot. When I got to this church, I said, you won't have any kids. I was completely wrong. We now have 30 hours of staff time just with children and youth. So it's really listening to the Spirit and trying to understand, where's God leading us.
I think it's important to note also that they hired their first children's ministry person when there were only 3 children in the church. So it was always about the future. There was a question here, not suggesting you move on, John, but who are the next ministers for your congregation? And that brings up a really important point about our staffing at our church. For instance, I am not an ordained minister. I was a lawyer by training, and I came to the church, met John as a volunteer at a church, and was working with music and such like that, doing the musicals I used to do in all the churches that I've been in. And so that's sort of my background. And then I was hired on staff as the worship animator, so I deal with things that aren't the sermon to try and bring in elements from culture, really, and other things into the service. So I'm not ordained. We have another woman on staff now who's a United Methodist minister. She wasn't hired as a minister. She's hired to do other things. So there are 18 people on our staff, actually. We have media communications person. We have children's ministry. We have now a building and church administrator. We have the church secretary. We have a music minister. We have an affirming person who deals with affirming ministry. We're thinking about doing a 3rd service, so there's some hours that are put in there. John is the only one on staff who is an ordained minister of those 18 people. And so we think in terms of areas of expertise, and we let people work within their smaller areas of expertise, rather than when you have 2 or 3 ministers whose training is all the same, or have similar training and are just dealing in different areas. That is a model that's working for us. So it's just something to think of, is staffing the next minister. Yes, when John is gone, we're going to need another ordained person at the helm. But what kind of person is... particular thing about John is, although he's incredibly gifted at preaching and understanding church, the vision that he has is that we're in culture, not stuck in our building. And he, although he's very gifted, does not have the ego that is threatened by other people's ideas or other people's contributions. And so that working as a team and understanding that we're all in this together and understanding what we're about and what we're trying to do is key to how this place works. And so transitioning is going to be tricky, I believe, but with the right vision and buying into the vision of what this place is and culture is going to be key to anybody who might replace John 20 years from now. Right, John?
Right. The other thing I would say on that, Greg, is that, so I think as a leader you think about, I think if we've done a good job, the place we leave succeeds even better after we're gone. In other words, if Hillhurst fell flat in its face, which it will not, but if it did, I would have to say that I did not do a good job leading. So the person you want to have, the person that comes after you, continue and do different and better. What kind of influence in that will I have in that? I mean, in the United Church, you probably don't have a lot, but you can sure have people on that committee who get that.
Well, thank you very much, John and Joanne. I've been very encouraged,
I really think that
I know all of us are here today at this sharing of ideas and possibilities.
We should sure want our churches to succeed when we're not here.
Missional ministry in our
I think
communities,
we're close to our time.
We're over.
So just final reminders for those of us here today. You can check out the website at the top right of your screen. There are some links. So the Hillhurst website, if you want to take a moment to look at that. Also, upcoming webinars. We do have one on rural ministry next Wednesday evening with Marvin Anderson. So I know a few of you are from rural areas. You might want to check that out and join us at that time. The recorded version of today's webinar will be available in about a week, and you'll receive an email once that's ready. And finally, we ask if you have a moment to fill out our feedback form, and you can find the link again at the top right in that little notes box, or you'll receive a link to that form as well. So we hope we'll see you again. You'll receive an email once that's ready. Right. And is your contact information on the website? Feedback form, and you can find the link again at the top right in that little notes box, or you'll receive a so thanks again. We hope we'll have you again, and good luck to everyone with your ministry.
And feel free to contact us too if you have questions.
Okay, thank you.
And is your